Welcome to our AES New York section panel. I'm Angela Piva. I'm a recording and mix engineer and a professor of audio at the Fierstein Graduate School, located at Steiner Studio Film Lot in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. I am also the chair of the AES New York section. Today's topic is music publishing and the Music Modernization Act. We have three great guests today, each with a different perspective on music publishing: Lorence Critelli, Scott Rubin, and Chris Horvath. Welcome, panelists. Thank you for your participation today. I'm going to read a short bio for each of our guests, and then we'll start on the topic of discussion. Lorence Critelli is an accomplished music executive. She's a former VP and writer of writer-publisher relations for SESAC in New York City, and recently served as president of the New York chapter of the Recording Academy. She's currently an assistant professor at Rider University in New Jersey, where she teaches in the newly developed Arts and Entertainment Industries Management program. Linda's a music industry consultant, advising clients on current issues in the music industry, and has also taught at NYU's Clive Davis School of Recorded Music, is a former president of Women in Music, and a board member of the Songwriters Hall of Fame. She is the co-founder of NYC3, an organization committed to education and network in New York's independent music publishing community, and was recently elected to serve on the New York Chapter Board of Governors of the Recording Academy. She lives in New Jersey with her husband and 12-year-old son. Welcome, Linda. Scott Rubin. Scott Rubin, next up, has over 30 years experience within the music industry with a primary focus on music publishing. He's been with Reach Music Publishing since 1999 and has worked with artists such as Ice-T, Public Enemy, Nate Dogg, Fat Joe, and Pete Rock. In addition to music publishing, Scott has been around recording studios and music production starting from an early age. He's written articles in music trade mags and websites including Billboard, DJ Times, Musician, and American Songwriter. Scott often speaks at music industry events and has hosted panels on most subjects within the music business. He lives in New Jersey, though he's been a lifelong New Yorker, having spent 51 of his glorious years on this planet in the metro New York, New Jersey area. Great to have you, Scott.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And of course, Chris Horvath next. All right, Chris. Chris has been a music creator for over 30 years, songwriter, composer, producer, arranger, musician, just about anything that has to do with the creation of music for albums, live film, TV, and other modern media. Artists Chris have worked with include Venice, Michael McDonald, Jackson Browne, Billy Idol, David Crosby, Brian McKnight, Coolio, Kenny Loggins, Jack Johnson, Trevor Hall, the Gigolo Ants, Ray Charles, Rock of Ages, and more. He's written and produced music for Grey's Anatomy, Scrubs, Alias, Digimon, The Tonight Show, America's Got Talent, Casual, Wife Swap, Unconscious, All I Wish, Entertainment Tonight, Ellen DeGeneres, Erin Brockovich, and many more. Since around 1992, Chris has been the owner and creative director of Jam Nation Music, a boutique music company in LA, offering the best in independent music creation and licensing. So welcome, Chris. So great to have all of you. I'm very excited about this panel today. So let's get started with some basic information about music publishing. So I think we're going to dive right in, and I'm going to ask the first question to Scott Rubin. Scott, can you please take us through a short overview of the history of the music publishing business and where it all started?
I'm happy to do that. First of all, again, happy to be here. Great, great panel, and it's my pleasure to be a part of this. The history of music publishing really started with the first sale, we'll call it, of something, or, it goes back to bar owners and restaurant owners owning piano rolls and how they had to purchase piano rolls, or a little down the line they would go into sheet music, and if you owned a saloon or something like that and people would request songs you would play, you'd have to buy sheet music to learn the songs. So all these were sort of sales that generated some royalties for the people who wrote the music. So eventually, from piano rolls to sheet music, we started to get into the recorded music business somewhere around the, late 20s, early 30s, and there was early vinyl, and then, vinyl as we know it went into tapes, and then cassettes, and then obviously into CDs. There was a quick thing with a couple of other mini discs and a quick thing with other, mini cassettes and a couple of other things. But basically that was the path. And then they left us in this world of the digital world today, where we're left with what we call streaming. And Music publishing is basically the collection of royalties based on using someone's music in any form, whether it's on the radio or on TV or in a sale or anywhere you consume someone's music.
I think that's a really good description, actually. Um, Chris, I'd like to ask you if you could please explain some basics about how music can generate revenue. What types of royalties are there? How are royalties generated? And yeah, so let us know your thoughts on that.
Thank you so much. I want to thank AES New York and Eventide for having us here. This is a lot of fun, and I get to see a couple of familiar faces, so I'm always grateful for that. What I'm going to do is take you through some stuff with some visual assistance for about the next 5 minutes or so. And what this is going to do is help those of you who may not quite understand, wow, I wrote this song, I have it recorded, now what happens? How does this thing turn into $1? How do I pay my rent with this? What happens next? Okay. Now, just to frame this, Linda and Scott are kind of they're several floors above me in the business here. I'm like
Go on.
I'm the do-it-yourself guy. Okay, so I have always been self-published. I've never in my life had a publishing deal, and like so I do all this myself. So I'm kind of doing this at a grassroots level. And the reason I want to tell you that is because I've been able to make a living doing this now for 30 years. So if I can do it, then you can do it too. All right. So let's go here. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully my technology chops are such that, okay, here we go. So what we're going to talk about right now is we're going to talk about you getting paid. Because as I tell all young people in the business, you cannot continue to create music for a living unless you get paid for the music you have already created. And that goes whether you're a songwriter, publisher, musician, whatever you are. Unless you are figuring out how to get paid, it will not work. Okay. So what I want to do is we're going to say you've written a song, and it's my great song, and you're going to change the course of Western music and possibly civilization with this thing, and you're going to make millions of dollars with it because you're sure this is the greatest thing that's ever been written. Awesome. Let's figure out how you're going to turn that into some money. The first thing that's very important to understand is that there are two different things. There is the song or the composition, and there is the recording or performance. And those are two different things. So if you write a song and record it, there are two main channels of revenue that are going to come from that. All right. Now let's figure out a way. So today, what I'm going to talk about is the song or the composition. All right. So a good way to illustrate this. So you've got your song, your composition, and you've recorded your original version of it. Well, let's say then a couple of people do cover versions of it. All right. So now there's 3 versions of that living out there. The nice thing for you, because you wrote this thing, right, is that all of the money comes back to you and your publisher, right? I'm my own publisher. Scott's a publisher. So the money from the song in question here would come back to Scott as well as the person that wrote it. A good way to illustrate this, again, that's the song of the composition. A good way to illustrate this is something, let's pick the most ludicrous ludicrous song we can. Yesterday. This thing has been recorded over 1,600 times by all kinds of artists, huge and small. So if you look in the column on the right, when Billie Eilish records it and sells a record, or it's streamed, or it's downloaded, or whatever happens with it, she and her stakeholders make money in the recording of that song, which is now Sony ATV, and I take no small amount of perverse pleasure in the fact that it was just so ludicrous that for many years the person that would make money is Michael Jackson's children until recently, but that's all gone. They sold it anyway. So the writers and the publishers of that song will make money every single time any of the versions in the right column have been performed or sold. So being a songwriter is kind of like owning real estate, really, right? So what I want you to understand here is that you can have a song without a recording, but you cannot have a recording without a song. Keep in mind in all of this. All right, so let's move forward here. You've got My Great Song. Let's talk about how a song makes money. Here are just some of the revenue streams. There's mechanical, which Scott alluded to, and he was correct. It started with piano rolls back in the day. More recently, it was CDs, and currently there's things like vinyl, which is making kind of a comeback, which is neat for people who are old like myself. So that means the name mechanical came because you were playing the song on a mechanical device, being it a player piano or a record player, a cassette tape machine or something. There was a mechanical transmission of the song involved. Okay, so that would be like you go to the record store, you buy the record, and that generates a mechanical royalty, right? That the songwriter would then get. Okay, now we have streaming mechanicals because we're not buying copies anymore, right? I personally miss iTunes. I liked when I bought the file and I had it on my device and I could do whatever I wanted with it. But now it doesn't work that way anymore. So streaming mechanicals have supplemented, I should say, the mechanical royalty model. Then there's performance royalties, and Linda's going to talk about this in a second. Performance royalties are anytime your music is performed or played in the public, in a place of business or something like that. Licensing, we're going to talk about that. That's when somebody wants to use your song in some sort of media or something like that, okay? Like a movie or film or TV, something. Creative fees. This is something that's often overlooked. I get a lot of money from creative fees. And a good example of that might be that, say, the classic one is, oh, wow, you know, we have a movie and we have, we as a temp track, we used What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. And imagine such a thing. They want a lot of money for us to use that song and we can't afford it. Can you write something like that? We'll pay you $5,000. Okay, sure. I'll kind of, you know, write something that could have been on that album that sounds similar to that. That's a real income stream for songwriters today. And then there's other things like print, sheet music. There's a website called musicnotes.com, which is if I want to get the sheet music to something digitally, I go there and I can buy the Billie Eilish song or whatever, and she makes a couple of pennies or whatever if she wrote the song. Okay, so that's a little bit of an overview. Right now, in the next 5 minutes, we're going to focus on these main revenues streams. Okay, so mechanical royalty income. This is very, very simple. You've got your song. It goes out there and it generates anything. It could be a sale or a download, or now in today's world, a streaming mechanical. This is collected by the publisher. So Scott says, hey, your song has been played all over the place. He and his people, they collect the money, and he can share with you the avenues and the ways that they do that. Some of the big publishers have their own collection systems, and then smaller publishers might contract with another system or another company to do that. And then the publisher then distributes the money to the writer based on whatever the deal is between the publisher and the writer. So it's pretty straight ahead. It's just, you know, the money, like the album, the song was sold, downloads, vinyl, whatever, how many copies times 9.1 cents per copy, bang, the money gets filtered through Scott to the writer. Very simple. Okay, now let's talk about performance royalty income. And the thing that's important to understand here is that the word performance is often very misunderstood. A performance is not me standing with my guitar at a microphone playing the song. A performance is when the song is transmitted in any form, recorded or live, in a place of business, okay? So when you think about that, this is a huge opportunity for revenue, huge. Here are some of the places that you will make money. Now, the first one is very obvious. Radio stations. Okay, so why is there traditionally been a radio station? Well, it's not so people can listen to ads. It's so people can listen to music. So the radio station should pay for the use of that music. All right, that's pretty straight ahead. But as oftentimes I go home at the holidays and I have to explain to my extended family what it is I do for a living, and after 30 years, I don't think they still understand. But one of the things that they don't get is, like, for instance, if you look down in the left column there, retail stores. Okay, why should a retail store pay money for performance royalties? Well, here's a perfect example. I'm 55 years old. If I go into the Gap to buy some clothes, they've done a whole thing to set the ambience of that place, the down to the wallpaper and the paint colors and everything. Also, the music that they're playing over the sound system. Because now suddenly at 55, damn, I feel a little bit sexier, and I think those jeans would look damn good on me now. You know why? I don't know, but it's arguable that the music that they're playing is contributing to that. So that's why this is a huge way that money comes. I think Linda can talk about this later, but my understanding is that, like, things like retail stores, restaurants, bars, Muzak, Home Depot, yada, yada, yada. That's about a third of the revenue of any given performance rights organization. Okay, so let's look how that works. So you got your song. Your song is performed. And again, that means it's either played on the radio, it's played on YouTube, it's played in Home Depot, it's played in an elevator on a Muzak version, it's played at the stadium in between plays when the football game is doing a timeout, any of those things. That money is collected by the performing rights organizations, and then it's distributed equal shares to the publisher and the writer. All right? And that's what we call mailbox money, and we love mailbox money. That's fun stuff. All right. Here's some sources of licensing income. Film and television, which is called a sync license. And the reason it's called a sync license is because you are synchronizing your song, your piece of music, could be a piece of music, a film cue, anything, or a cue that's used, that's not a song. It's not necessarily a song, but you're synchronizing your music to picture, okay? Now, you have to get a license for this. You have to get the permission and cut a deal with the copyright holder to use that in your show or your film or whatever you're doing. That is unlike what's called the compulsory license for mechanicals, which, like, going back to the example of yesterday, I can take the song Yesterday, record it, put it on my album, and nobody can tell me I can't do it. I can do it. All I have to do is make sure I take the steps to guarantee that the copyright owner gets paid. Okay. In film and TV, it's not like that. I have to get approval from the people that own the song Yesterday to put it in the movie. All right. Advertising, commercials, huge revenue stream for copyright owners of songs. You've seen that a million times. We saw, I remember years ago, I couldn't believe it. Led Zeppelin was doing a car commercial. That was like, oh my God, Rome has fallen. But, I don't begrudge anybody because there's a huge amount of money to be made there. Corporate events. Okay, this is the kind of thing. This is now we're talking about my world. I don't have a hit song. I have never in my life had a hit song. I've never been in the same zip code as a hit song. But you know what? All my bills are paid, and I bought a house, and it works. How? Because of things like this. So a corporate event might say, hey, we want you to license your song that we heard because we're doing our sales event in Champaign, Illinois, and we want to play this song against videos and as the CEO walks onto the stage. Great. You know what? Give me $500 and we'll call it a day. Beautiful. That's the kind of thing that will just keeps adding to the pile. Businesses, promos, and websites. For years, I had licensed a piece of music to a real estate company in Denver that would pay me $250 every 6 months so that I had some piece of music they wanted on their landing page. Go figure. Okay, so you've paid 2 months of my electric bill. I'm good with that. Product and ancillary. So when you do you buy a greeting card and you open it up and suddenly a little cute version of Splish Splash I'm Taking a Bath starts playing, whoever wrote that song is getting paid. So that's licensing income. There's a lot of ways to do that. Let's look at how this happens. And again, it's very simple. You've got your song. The show is licensed by entity, right, of any of the ones I just described. Scott collects the money, and then depending on your deal with Scott, he distributes your share. Could be, however you worked it with him. In my case, I just collect it all because nobody wants to publish me, so I guess I have to do it myself. All right. So licensing is a real big deal and has been since the time that album sales fell off. And this is, you're going to see at the end of this thing how some of these income streams, they fuel each other and they feed from each other. So it's really kind of cool. All right. So now let's put it all together. So you've got your song that's going to change the course of Western music and hopefully civilization. And let's look at how that thing is going to make money that we've talked about. You've got your mechanical royalties, both hard copy and streaming, and they're the vastly majority is streaming now. You've got your performance royalties, license fees, and then all the other stuff. Okay, so what happens is your song goes out there and it does all of these things, and then because it does that, it brings you back money.
That's it.
Bring you back $10, $10,000, or $1 million. I hope it brings you back 10 million, frankly. But here's the one thing that's really cool about all of this that is important to understand. These revenue streams fuel each other. And let me show you how that might work, okay? So a few years ago, I did a tentpole episode for Grey's Anatomy, the TV show on ABC. And what happened was music was really the main character in this episode. And it was their like I said, their tentpole episode for this season. So what happened was there was, I think it was about 12 or 15 songs that were played. I mean, really featured forefront in this episode. So that generated licensing fees, right? So they went to the Fray and Snow Patrol and groups like that and said, we're going to use your song, and they paid them a lot of money. Well, guess what? That licensing fee wasn't the end of the story. That licensing fee generated performance royalties. Why? Because the show was broadcast on ABC across the country and now is in syndication, cha-ching. And so that generates a whole other set of, on top of that, because of that and the attention that the show got, it generated a bunch of mechanical royalties, both hard copy and streaming, because the show broadcast on a Thursday, and on Friday morning, because it had such a high viewing audience, the soundtrack for that episode was #2 on iTunes, and it stayed there for 5 days. So, and then it fell off slowly. So it all kind of fed upon itself. So now I hope that helps you see how when you write a piece of music, there are a lot of ways this is going to make money. And it's very important that you understand that and do what you can to look at all these things as pipelines, to push your songs down these pipelines. And the thing that the two things that I always say to young writers or people who are just getting into it at any age, I don't mean young at their age, but just starting, there's two things. One is that when they say, do your best, write your best music, like just focus on creating the best art you can, that's not good business advice. The best business advice is make the most art you can. I would rather own 10% of than 100% of 10 songs. Is spread out over a wider footprint, and you're ultimately going to make more money that way. So write your music, get it done, do a good job. Don't sweat the compression ratio on floor tom 2, or like, should I say, and or the in the out chorus. Just get it done, put it out there. And the last thing is that I have learned this is a get rich slow business. The music media feeds us that we need to focus on making millions of dollars. I don't focus on making millions of dollars. I focus on making billions of dimes. It just comes in a different way. So I hope that's been helpful, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker, and I will sit here and wait until someone else pulls my string. Thank you so much.
Wow, Chris, that was amazing. I mean, yes.
Wow.
I mean, that was a really excellent way to explain that and simplify it. It seems easy, but it's not really. These are kind of some complex things, and I know this is hard-earned, knowledge that this has been like a lifetime to acquire this, and I also I agree with you 150%. Get your catalog together, just pile up as much material as you can. That's really excellent advice. So thank you, Chris. That was really good. We're gonna keep going on about some of these topics you raised too. So my next question is for Linda. And this has a couple parts to it. What is a pro? What is its function? In the USA, who are the 3 main publishing collection agencies? And internationally, is revenue creation and royalty collection similar to how it's done in the USA? And do USA songwriters and publishers have to set up affiliations with international PROs?
So thanks, Angela. And what a delight it is to be here with my college chums. Angela and Chris and I all went to Berkeley together at the same time. And we have stories we could tell, but we won't.
We do.
So a PRO, performing rights organizations, Chris touched on it really beautifully, actually. They're basically collection agents for songwriters and music publishers. They collect the public performance royalties on behalf of their affiliated songwriters and publishers. Uniquely, the United States has like 4 performing rights organizations, used to be just 3, ASCAP, BMI, SESAC, and now GMR is in the mix. So songwriters had their choice of which one to join. Now things have changed quite dramatically in the past few years. SESAC has now become very selective, and you have to be invited to go into SESAC. I'm a former SESAC employee. I worked there for many, many years, and they have recently changed a lot of how they do business, and they are no longer just accepting anybody to be their songwriters. You have to apply, and they have to choose you. BMI and ASCAP, anyone can basically join them as long as you've got some business to do, and both equally excellent organizations, and you can join them online. And then you've got the GMR, which is Global Music Rights. Did I say that right? Or Global Rights Music, GMR, Global Music Rights. Irving Azoff's company, it's a private company as well, and not anyone can just join that organization. But just to share with you that there are several organizations, and each one of them, basically they sell a blanket license to all of those places that Chris mentioned, from the radio stations to the Gap and everywhere in between. They sell a blanket license for the music that's in their catalog, and then they collect those royalty fees, and they distribute them to their songwriters and publishers based on how many performances they have. Where the PROs differ in the United States is in how they actually use the technology to collect data on how songs are collected and how songs are performances are collected and tracked. All of them have very sophisticated but different systems, but surprisingly they all end up within the same ballpark of payments. What was the next question? So that's performing rights organizations. They collect, distribute to their affiliated.
And I think
you need to join one, by the way. If you have music that's being performed out there, that's when you really need to join a PRO. And you choose one. Just pick the one that suits you. Really, your only choice, unless you've been invited to SESAC or to GMR, is to choose from ASCAP or BMI. And I would just go to their websites and see which one feels the best to you. And really, I can't compare the two of BMI and ASCAP. They're both equally very good and very large, but you can join. And you need to register your songs. You need to set up a publishing company, or a BMI will allow you to set up a company without a publisher, so that you could set up as a writer, and they'll pay you both sides of the pie through the writer account. That might be a little less expensive way to go, especially if you're really just self-publishing and you're not getting into it as heavily as Chris Horvath has gotten into it, where you really need to set up a publishing company. You could start that way. But and then it's really key to register the works, because no monies get paid from any of these income streams that we're going to be talking about today unless someone's registered the songs. They've got to be input, and you've got to have the correct information. And the information we're talking about is who are the songwriters and who are the publishers, and what percentage do each of you own. And that's something that needs to be decided, and we're going to talk about that later with, in the studio or in the creation process. You never should leave your creative session without saying, oh, hey guys, come on, let's all decide how much percentage each of us has, and can we all sign on this little piece of paper here and just agree so that we can all register these songs ourselves, because you might put yours in CSAC, I'm going to put mine in ASCAP, and you're going to put yours in BMI, but we all need to have the right information so that it's all correct. So that's a key thing. The international, when you join a PRO, you generally join for the world. So the PROs have reciprocal agreements with all of the other 95, 98 PROs around the world, and they collect on your behalf. So you go into this database once you join a PRO. Your name is in there, you have an identifying number. And so when your music is played in Europe, they can look you up and see, oh, you belong to SESAC, and they'll send the royalties to SESAC, and then SESAC will then send it to you. It's only advantageous for you to join a performing rights organization outside of the United States directly if you have a tremendous amount of activity there. Otherwise, it's just not worth your while. It's too much, trouble, and you have to pay taxes, and it's too much trouble. I wouldn't do it unless you were really seriously into business and you had a tremendous amount of activity and other writers in that. Otherwise, it's better just to do that, or use a sub-publisher to collect for you on your behalf.
I think that was a great explanation, Linda. That's it's also, I think it's a little difficult for folks to understand. We have a lot of students and young people too, young musicians and creators watching probably from all around the world. We've extended this to all of the AES. So I think that's great information. It's important too to kind of try to decide your song splits, although it doesn't feel so creative when you're writing to do that. It's really, really important, and to try to find a way to approach that. And we'll continue to talk about that too as we go on today. But I think I'm going to move on to Scott next. I have a question for you, Scott.
Yes.
And we talked about this the other day a little bit too, but how does publishing apply to streaming? And can you also expound a little bit about sync licenses?
Yeah. Just going back for a quick thing, which I thought was a great point that Linda and you made about song splits and how to get them done in the recording studio. I like to refer to that as the peer pressure. Who's going to be, when we were all growing up, it was about peer pressure, and who's going to be the first one to, act like a fool at a party, or who's going to do something silly, or who's going to make a joke. But the one person in the room that could say, hey guys, this is important to us from a business perspective, and take away from that creativity for 3 seconds, is probably the person who ends up getting his stuff registered properly for the rest of his career, whereas other people just don't choose to make that choice. And it is a little bit of a nerdy thing to do. It doesn't seem creative, but as Chris pointed out, if you don't understand the business you're in, it's hard to be in that business. So we like to tell all of our writers and partners that we work with, take a second and have a discussion. If you could have a discussion about chord progression or anything else going on in the room or in the world, then you could have a discussion about, hey, the four of us share the song. How about we split it equally? Or make another suggestion, you know? So anyway, that's just my thing. I always think it's like peer pressure for the creative person to get in there. But going back to your question about streaming, you know, everybody, first of all, publishing is a huge gray area. We all know this. We all look at, when we talk to people about music publishing, you hear all the time, oh, publishing's a gray area. I don't even understand it. It's not even gray. It's charcoal gray. It's almost so not gray, there's no clarity in it. And unless you're a super publishing nerd, which I like to think of myself as, not in my knowledge, but just in my passion about publishing, it's hard to understand all these different things. And they were very eloquently put by everybody so far. But when you're a producer or an engineer or two steps back as a songwriter, and you're just not seeing the end result, it's hard to get a grasp of all these steps in between. So I just want to say, if anybody has any issues, they could always contact me or anybody else, I'm sure, you know, and get some questions to it. But going back to streaming, we all live in this streaming society. Obviously, everybody's got a phone in their hand, and everybody's consuming music via their phone or tablets or things like that. And the streaming thing really came of age right after, you know, iTunes was extremely popular with the download position, and everybody was, you know, moving from CDs to iTunes to purchase downloads, and from downloads, they got into the streaming. So streaming does have some elements to it that not everybody understands. Everybody, shouldn't say everybody, a lot of consumers don't understand the relationship between consuming something on their phone and how a songwriter gets paid. And I understand that that's not of issue for most people. They just want to enjoy their song. So I completely get that. But when it comes to publishing and streaming, there are two types of streaming royalties. A lot of people think it's just something like Pandora or something like Sirius is playing. Those are performance streams. Those are things that you have no choice of. You listen to what is being put out because you chose to listen to that channel, internet radio, Pandora, things like that. They play the music, you consume the music, just like you would on a radio station. You can't tell the radio station what to play. They play it, you consume it. You could change the channel, you can make a request, but it's really basic about they put out music, you consume it. So there's a performance element of streaming, and then there's a mechanical royalty in streaming, which Chris also talked about, because that comes into play when you make a choice. And by a choice, I mean if you're on Apple Music and you decide to play Billy Joel, no one's controlling that Billy Joel song but you. You've decided to play it. So in a sense, that goes back to the mechanical, the choice, though it's not necessarily a mechanism. You are using your phone, but you're using your choices to change what you want to hear. With that, it becomes what they call a mechanical or a sale. And that's how streaming royalties have two different streams of income. There's a performance royalty and there's a mechanical royalty based in streaming. So those are the two things. As far as sync goes, we talked a little bit more about sync, and Chris was really right up on this. We're very passionate about sync in the publishing world because sync is the only choice that a music licensor has to make by saying, I think my value of this song is X. If you don't think the value of my song is X, then you can't use it in your movie or in your TV show. So like Chris said, when it comes to sync choices, if anyone makes a movie or a film or has a corporate event and you want to use my song, you have to negotiate a license. I freely could say yes. I freely could say no. I could say it's worth $1 million. They could say you're ridiculous. Any way it goes, there's a free market choice. And that is the only section of the music business right now, as far as publishers go, where there's a free market. When you have mechanical streaming, when you have performance streaming, and when you have performance royalties, those are set by a little bit of a nerdier issue to discuss, but they're set actually by the government into what is paid out and how they're paid out. That's a whole nother conversation for a bigger panel, which all our nerdy publisher friends would all love to be involved. I know we're all shaking our heads. I
Todd,
hope
is
that
there a
makes sense.
range for sync licenses, an amount, like something you want to talk about too, or?
I think it's really across the board. I mean, if you look at very large artists are not normally looking to do sync for very low fees. There is a good point that Chris pointed out before was, he heard Led Zeppelin on a Cadillac commercial. I believe it was Cadillac at the time. And, oh my goodness, this is Led Zeppelin, the thing we all grew up with that was untouchable. No one could put Led Zeppelin in anything. But what happens after a while is and I'm not saying this is in Led Zeppelin's case, but in general, if a revenue stream starts to dry up, say they're not touring, say they're not having as many album sales, say they're doing different things where their copyrights are getting older and not embraced by as many people. Again, has nothing to do with said artist. It's just when a certain stream certainly tends to dry up, you look for revenue in different areas. If your album sales aren't terrific, maybe you go out on tour. If you can't tour, you try to get maybe a song in a movie or a film or a TV commercial or things like that. So I think for years, while there was really plenty of, let's call it what it is, while there was plenty of money being generated by album and CD sales that were very high profit for record labels, publishers, songwriters, and everybody involved, there wasn't a need to put your music in a beer commercial or a Cadillac commercial or on a Target ad or a Walmart ad. It wasn't cool. But it became cool, and now there's this competitiveness amongst large artists of who got what commercial. Hey, I got Samsung. Well, hey, I got Walmart. Hey, I got Target. So the fees that are generated are widely various. They could be as small as a couple of $1,000s or a couple of $100s for both the recording side, as Chris mentioned, the recording of it, and the copyright side. So there's the recording and the copyright, and they all share the money equally, usually. And it could be as high as a couple of $100,000 for a large artist to be in a movie. And large artists normally turn things down unless it's of a certain level. And some artists turn things down just based on they don't want their art equated with anything else but themselves or their art. They don't want a song they wrote in a jeans commercial. That's their choice. And they can make that choice.
So I mean, I think it's definitely worthy to go after these sync licenses, even if you're an indie artist. No matter who you are, it seems like it's a nice source of revenue if you can get it.
Well, of course, anybody who wants to embrace your music, you can make something work. Now, you might not be able to extract the maximum amount of money that you think it's worth, but it's a negotiation, and there's also the look about it. Is it going to be seen by people? Is it going to be run on the internet for a long time? Is it going to bring you ancillary business because of the fact that it's in a TV commercial, or people are going to ask about it or chat about it or post about it? Who's that writer? There were websites created where songs that were placed in TV commercials, when you can't identify the song, there were websites created just to figure out who's that song on that commercial. And then it became, apps that do that, et cetera, et cetera. And it's definitely valuable to go after. It has to be, because at this point, if you're not catching heat on the artist, as an artist, if your stuff's not catching on the streaming world, but some very very small indie film, the music supervisor catches your ear and says, I'd love for you to be in my film. What's it going to take to get in? Make a deal. You never know what happens with it.
Yeah, excellent point too. And a lot of folks are doing media, content creation, a lot of films and things, music being implemented in films. So
well, that's one area that's definitely not going to slow down. Content creation is going to be, driving the industry within the next few years. If you look at all the channels that are creating their own media sources and all the film companies that are creating their own streaming services, and it's just there's going to be endless amounts of content coming if they're not already. Sorry, Linda, go right ahead.
Yeah. I just wanted to say that now, for the people who are watching here, if you're sitting there thinking, well, how do I get my songs into film or television? There are so many online educational resources happening right now on the internet. Just on my Facebook feed alone, I've gotten 3 or 4 invitations for classes. I know Michelle Weiss Maslin does a great Los Angeles. I'm sure you guys could rattle off a few others, but I think if you just, Google seminars, how to get my songs in film and TV, you'll see plenty out there, and many of them are free, just to get you some inspiration to, as to where you could be focusing your music, your writing specifically. Some people write specifically with music placement in mind, and then how to go about doing it.
Yes, that's excellent suggestion, Linda. That's a lot of work, I think, to be found there. A lot of music needed, a lot of indie, young and up and coming filmmakers. Also, here in New York, we have the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. That's a valuable resource for anyone that lives in this area, and I know there's many more as well. All right, well, let's move on to the next question. I'm going to come back. Oh, actually, you know what? This is to you all. What is Sound Exchange? Who should and how does one create an account there? Does anyone want to take that one on?
I'm happy to take that on. Sound Exchange was born out of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act in 2000, and they created an income stream for what was then for digital music. At the time, no one could dream what the heck digital music was going to become. At the time, it was sort of, oh yeah, that thing. For the DAT players, and there was going to be a Sirius XM radio stations. They were separate at the time. So for digital transmission of music, this new collection agent was born, and it is government regulated. And they set up shop in Washington, D.C., and started to collect royalties by licensing all of the digital outlets. At the time, this is before the digital service providers even came about.
Right.
But they started with that, and they started actually even licensing the hardware, like the physical boom boxes, back in the day that actually transmitted and were able to, you're able to do high-tech digital recording. And so they got their money from different sources. But the long story short is that now it is a multi-billion-dollar business who collects the digital streaming royalties for the sound recording. Remember when Chris gave that explanation, there's two pies. There's the sound recording pie, which is the artist and the record labels. And then there's the songwriter publisher pie, the song pie on this side. They're two separate copyrights, two separate income streams. So this is just for the songwriter this is just for the artist and record label royalties that are distributed through Sound Exchange. If you're an artist, a musician, a producer and engineer, now those producers and engineers and mixers can now get royalties from Sound Exchange. It is the collection agent for all things digital. They collect royalties from all the digital service providers, of course, Sirius XM radio. And they distribute it to the writers and publishers. Much of it goes through performing rights organizations, but a lot of it also goes directly to the copyright owners on the master side.
Thank you, Linda. That was good explanation. Okay, I think I'm ready for the next question. I'm going to come back around to Chris. And this is also a two-part question. Why and how do you register a song? When should you register a song? And then the second half of that is copywriting a song a separate procedure, and who copyrights the original recording of the song?
Let me, I will definitely get to that. But one thing that was touched upon that I want to just go back to was the idea of song splits and working that out. So here's what I'm going to do. Because I am all about real practical information, I'm going to pretend that you and I are about to write a song, and I'm going to have the conversation with you right now. This is the conversation that I have with every single person I'm going to write a song with. Here's what it is. Like, like, okay, we've made a date. Oh, next Tuesday we're going to get together and write on something. I'll have two conversations. One is we're starting from zero, and one is I'm bringing an idea. Here's starting from zero. Hey man, so listen, I'm really looking forward to us doing this thing, and I'm really psyched about it because I know who you are and I want to write with you, and I think we're going to have a lot of, at worst case scenarios, we're going to have a great time. But just so that we're clear on things and don't get uncomfortable, and I'm totally open to your thoughts on this, but here's what I'd like to propose. No matter what happens in the room on the day, we just split it equally. We go 50-50, okay? Because I don't want to sit here and fight about, well, I kind of wrote the chorus and the chorus is worth more, or you know what, I wrote a little more of this, or you wrote it, because that's going to kind of create this cancer that will creep into our relationship. And if this works out, dude, I want to write with you for like the next 10 years, okay? I want us to be friends, and we go to lunch and have drinks and it's all good, right? So if you're cool with that, then I would be really, I think it's going to be fine. If it's okay with you, I will, I have something we can sign to agree to that. If you've got something, I'm open to that. But, I just don't want to think after the fact what we're doing. Okay, so that's when we start from zero. Let's say I have an idea that it's damn near finished. It's so close, but I just can't, for some reason, I can't get it finished, whatever that is. Here's what I say. Listen, I have this thing specifically that I want to bring to you because I think you might be able to help me bring this across the finish line. I got to be honest with you. I've got pretty much all of it done. I might have it 85% done, but for whatever reason, it's just not happening. It's there. I've been messing around with this thing for a long time. Sentimentally attached to it. So would it be okay with you, since I've kind of bringing you an almost completed idea, could we do a 75-25 split? Is that okay with you? If it's not, then I'm completely open to whatever your thoughts are, like that. In that situation, even if they're not okay with that, I say, look, I'm cool to split the song 50-50. But what I would appreciate is that on this one, because I've been working on it so long, and I just, for whatever reason, I'm really attached to it. It's got sentimental reasons for me. I'd like to have veto power. And what that means is that we're in the room, we come up with an idea, I get to say no, and no will win. So that you say, oh no, here's the line. That's not really doing it for me. Great, we come up with another one, no questions asked. And if that's going to be stressful and a bad way to work, then no problem. I will finish the song with someone else. A way that happened in practicality was Dave Bassett, who's a well-known singer-songwriter. I had this tune that I had been working on literally for 3 years, 3 solid years. I had started and stopped it, fixed it, this and that. We got together, we wrote in 15 minutes. He had, oh no, do this for the bridge. And you know what? Oh, the last line of the chorus is also the first line of the chorus. Whoa, I never thought of that. 15 minutes he put into it. You know what I said? Dude, this is half yours. Because I'm not going to sit there and go, well, I kind of got this 90% of the way there and you came in 15 minutes. No way. You know what he did? He unlocked it for me. Because, Rise Above, which was the song, that'd still be sitting on some hard drive somewhere doing nothing. And I made money from that. So that's an important thing about splits. Okay, so with regard to registering songs. When Angela says registering songs, I think she means registering them with your performing rights organization, whatever that is. If they don't know that song exists, then you are not going to get paid for that song. End of discussion. So you must register it with the proper information that is correct and accurate, which is shockingly a big part of the way that money falls through the cracks. It's not copyright infringement, it's inaccurate information. So you put in, you go like, okay, so right now, I'm a SESAC writer. I was a BMI writer, and I have publishing companies at all three. I have ASCAP publishing company, a BMI publishing company, and a SESAC publishing company. Registering your songs, I can register a song in probably less than 60 seconds. I go to the website, I enter the information, blah, 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 blah. I hit enter and I submit it, and then it's just in a queue for them to review it, and it's done. It's so easy. A monkey can do it. If I've got 10 songs that I did that are the same writer information, say, Linda and I wrote 10 songs together, then I just enter the information for one and I copy and paste it to the next one, the next one, the next one. I register 10 songs in 120 seconds. It's very, very simple. So once you become a member of a performing rights organization and you do that process once, you'll kind of go, oh my God, this is not filing a tax return. This is actually pretty easy. Okay. The thing about accurate information, and this is going to come into play because of had spoken about, I think, or was that in the pre-call? I can't remember. But entering your information, which we call the metadata, all right? So that's the data that's embedded in files and is attached to your song. Who wrote it? Who owns the publishing? Who's the artist? Blah, 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 blah. That's all got to be very accurate, because if it's not accurate, you're not going to get paid. I have had and the money, by the way, that doesn't make its way to you, it goes into what's called a black box. And there's these different black boxes all over the world, which basically means, wow, we know we have to pay on this song, but we don't really know who owns it. And then there it sits, and it may or may not find its way to you. I've had a situation where a one-character typo in the title of a song has been a six-figure error in my favor that came to me years later. So you've got to make sure. So where are these errors happening? If you enter all your information correctly, well, it could be somebody in Scandinavia who doesn't really speak English, which is no fault of their own, but there's some, they just enter the title or the composer name wrong, and it happens. So, so when should you register your song? I say register your song kind of when it's completed and you're ready to put it into the world. All right. When you're ready to shove it down the pipeline and send it out and get it going, that's when you do it. And it's very, very simple. With regard to copywriting songs, again, I'm a do-it-yourself guy, and Scott and Linda can speak to this. But probably in the first 3 years of my career, I filed some copyrights. I haven't filed a copyright ever.
Right.
And you know what? Here's the deal. Two of them have been for infringement, okay? And in both of those cases, there was a reference track involved. So the example being, wow, we want to license Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, but we can't afford it. Can you write something close to it? And then whoever wrote the song, it becomes so close that it's obvious that that's a ripoff. And here comes Marvin Gaye's family and people, like it happened with Robin Thicke. It's happened with a lot of people, like lot of, and even low level. What I'm talking about is like the one was a commercial, one was a library track. And it was between a $70,000 error in one situation and $500,000 in another. So I personally don't file copyrights, because if somebody pushes me, I'm not, oh shit. It's muted. Hold on. I'm going to try this then. I'm sorry. Hold on.
We can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can. Okay. Okay. So I don't file copyrights, and I know one situation in my entire career where a friend of mine said, "Wow, I played this song for the producer of this big artist, and listen to this cut on side 2. of their album. And I said, wow, there's no question in my mind that's kind of a wow. He wanted to write his own version of your song. One time in 30 years, I've done that. So I don't copyright. I do register with the performing rights organizations. The one thing to know, and then I'll be done, is that if you copyright your song, well, I should say this: if you don't copyright your song, that doesn't preclude you from getting a judgment in your favor. The only thing that it definitely guarantees you is if you copyright your song and somebody infringes on it, then you are automatically entitled to court costs. Okay.
It also establishes a timeline of when the song was originally,
Correct.
registered.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. So you are automatically entitled. So if you have to sue, pick the artist, whatever, and you spend $100,000 in legal fees, if you've copyrighted your song and it's registered with the Copyright Office, end of discussion. The person who loses is paying your legal fees. All right. But again, I'm the songwriter next door. Okay. I'm not the superstar. I'm the guy who writes the songs that are in this TV show and that TV show and everything. I've never had a hit. I'm never going to have a hit. I'm okay with that. And so copywriting to me is like, okay, if it's so blatant that I feel like I've been infringed on, I'll go represent myself in court, whatever. So that's all I have to say on that.
No, that's really, I think that's pretty, that brought a lot to the table about that. It's pretty interesting actually. And also your description to folks, or your approach of how to do song splits, is really healthy. And I hope that people will take note of that, because that really is the best way to do it. So, but never say never about the hit song, Chris. You never know. Still got quite a ways to go. So, moving along, I'm going to address Linda and Scott and ask you both: do you find that many songwriters like Chris do not spend the money to copyright the songs they register with the PRO? And just any other info you want to offer on the copyright discussion?
Well, Scott, you probably physically register more copyrights than I do. I just teach about it. So if you want to answer that would be great.
I can't say that most of my clients don't don't register their songs with a PRO. Now, of course, there's two sections of registration we're talking about, as we've discussed before, for the songwriter to have his account and the publisher to have their account. So if I have a client and the client is the songwriter and I'm the publisher, and we both have a great understanding of each of our jobs, he or she will register the song on their own behalf as a songwriter, which ASCAP or PRO would pay them writer royalties of performance directly. And that's not something that the publisher takes part of. Whereas now I'm the publisher, and if that songwriter is the co-publisher, but I have the ability to register on their behalf as we're both co-publishers, then of course I would register the song in our publishing account and collect money for the both of us to share. But I could never register the song as a songwriter per se and have that be collected by the publisher. So just a quick tidbit of information, what I think we all can understand, is that there's a very interesting relationship, though you're working together. There are performance royalties that go directly to the writer, and there is also performance royalties that go to the publisher. How the publisher splits them with the writer who could also be a co-publisher is up to their relationship and what they negotiate. But yes, I gotta say, I cannot remember too many instances where people who are my clients didn't bother to register their own songs. Now, they might not do it for 2 years in a row and then suddenly go through, right, Linda, and go through and register 20 songs out of nowhere. But if you have no activity, what's the use in theory of them, going through it? They're creative. They're not business oriented. So a lot of them don't do it until they have to. They know a song is coming out. They know a song's about to be played on the radio. They register the song. That's my history with most people, with most songwriter clients, I would say.
And publishers as well. I mean, I think a lot of publishers don't really register copyrights until the songs are really released.
Mhm.
It's a kind of a, I hate to use the word nuisance, but it's it's a headache, and it's not cheap. I mean, is it still $35 a song?
To register with the copyright office. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think 35. It was 25 at one point. It might be 35 now.
Yeah, it's
And
35.
it used to be, we used to always teach people about the way that you could register copyrights, where you could register all your songs, like Linda's song Summer 2020, and I could list all my songs for $35. And then just so there's one registration, but of course you'd have to know that they were under Linda's songs 220 instead of the actual song title, I Love You So. You wouldn't find the title in there. But they've since changed that, and I just pulled this up. They limit you can do 10 unpublished songs at a time for $55, but they all have to be released on the same date, bundled together like an album, and have all the same copyright people, same people on the copyright.
Otherwise, they charge you separately for each entry.
Otherwise, it's separate for each. So, like if you're writing with multiple different partners, that wouldn't work for you. So, anyway, you can go to copyright.gov and get information, all of that. And, it is important if you're really becoming a professional songwriter, releasing, particularly pitching music for artists. I think it's important to get those songs copywritten if when you've got some activity going on.
Yeah, I think most of the time, if you're a songwriter and you have a relationship with your publisher, it's kind of expected on their behalf to register the songs. A lot of larger publishers will register songs on the songwriter behalf, but whatever fees that they charge, they will charge back as an expense to the songwriter as well.
Yeah, and you turn in 20 songs. I mean, that's $700 a year, or whatever.
Yeah, and if you're making $650 a year, then you're in the hole.
Exactly. Sadly, I know a lot
Yeah. And just to point something else out, so there's copywriting a song and there's also copywriting a sound recording. So
correct. They're two different things. So you would copyright your songs, and then when you finish your album, if you are the record label or you own your own, if you're releasing your own record, say, you will want to copyright that sound recording so that you can make claim to that with sound exchange for synchronization royalties.
And they're both registered at the same place, as you mentioned. They're still both at copyright.gov.
Exactly, just two different forms: an SR form for the sound recording, a PA form for the performing artist, but it really is for the songwriter and publisher. PA form. It's all spelled out on copyright.gov.
Yeah, I'm actually have a few links I'm gonna post at the end too onto Facebook for everyone. That's one of them. Actually, that's pretty important. But thank you for clarifying that. So I'm gonna bring it back to you, Linda, and then maybe Chris and Scott want to chime in. What is the relationship between the publisher and the songwriter? Who chooses to work with who? Does the songwriter choose the publisher, or the publisher choose the songwriter? And the second part of that is, do publishers place songs in movies or on albums, or is that someone else's purview?
Well, it just all depends. It depends on where you are in your career. Generally, music publishers, they're nothing without a songwriter. But a music publisher, depending on who you're talking about, a small independent company or a large company. If it's a large music publishing company, one of the majors that has a major label attached to it or so, they generally have their choice of who they want to work with as far as songwriters go. It's not so easy to get a publishing deal. They're very hard to come by. Publishers will generally give an advance to a young writer or old writer. They'll give an advance for whatever you're bringing, if it's a catalog or maybe you've got a song placement. Today, in today's world, music publishers are looking for songwriters who are connected to artists, who have cuts, who have music out there. The publisher and songwriter relationships vary from company to company. I've seen some beautiful relationships where a publisher and a writer are just so creatively involved with one another. And then I've seen sometimes where, the songwriter doesn't even know who their publisher is, or their publisher got fired and now they're working with a whole new set of people. So you have to keep that in mind. The person that brings you into the company may not always be there, and you'll have to fend for yourself. So I always say keep your agreements short, on the shorter side, for a couple of years, so you don't tire yourself up, and recognize that those songs that you write while you are under that contract will belong to that publisher, the publishing share. Now, one thing to keep in mind is when you write a song, that all songs are split into two. So you have a writer share and a publisher share, and they become a song. Now, if you have a publishing deal, you're only going to get this share. Okay, the publisher's going to get the other share. So if it's $1, 50 cents goes to you as a songwriter, 50 cents goes to the publisher. That makes $1. Now, if you do a deal, the most common deal in New York City, and these kind of vary from city to city, is a co-publishing deal. And that's where you split the publishing. So you split the publishing between the two of you. So the publisher has this little piece, and you have the writer share and a little piece of the publishing. So you see, you're still at the advantage, if you will, in getting the royalties. And then it can get split further and further. Now, remember, if you're a co-writer, you're really talking about this now. You see what I'm saying? And the pieces get split up.
And those papers, as you split them up, will eventually become the micro pennies that get earned on each song, for sure.
Exactly. So depending on, like, if you're writing in the Black music world, that's very popular, where there's a lot of songwriters on one song. Someone's writing the beat, someone's writing the music, someone might write a rap, and before you know it, you've got 8 or so different songwriters. Well, there might also be, half of them have publishers. That's another 4 publishers. Some of them have co-publishing deals. That's another 8. This is where you get these song titles that have, so many entities attached to them because of the co-writing situations, and that pie gets split up like you wouldn't believe. But how that pie is split up, those percentages, they all have to equal 100%, 50% on the writer side, 50% on the publisher side, 100%. That 100% gets registered into the performing rights organization. That's your first step in your performing rights organization. And then from there, you're going to register the same things through Sound Exchange, through the New Music Licensing Collective. You're going to keep Mechanical Licensing Collective, and so on. However that song is spelled out percentage-wise from the top is the way it's going to be split out around the world. And everyone's going to look to that song registration form to see who the owners are and where the monies go. So if there's any monies out there floating around for one reason or another from a foreign performing rights organization, it comes through your society, they're going to find you and they're going to pay according to that song registration form. If you've only got 5%, you're only going to get 5%.
Fair enough. I mean, that's a good way to describe it. Chris, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no. That was great. It's funny. I have a graphic that does that exact thing, but she did it great. So
yeah.
Well, I'd love to see your graphic one day.
Want to see it? It'll take just a minute.
Scott, meanwhile, do publishers place songs in movies or on albums, or is that someone else's purview?
So I guess it really depends upon what type of publisher you are and what. Let me answer one thing before that. You said, what is the relationship prior? Like you asked Linda, what is the relationship between the songwriter and the publisher? And my answer is going to be based on that. It really depends on what your relationship is. For example, if you are a songwriter who does not need creative input or help in any way from your publisher, then let's just make up a name, you're Jason Mraz. if you're Jason Mraz, you know every artist, you know every songwriter, you've been around forever, you've wrote hit songs. Do you actually need a music publisher to help your songs get into any kind of creative element? If you do, great, that's the understanding that you have with your publisher. Most of the time, the more successful you are as a songwriter, whether you're an artist or a producer, anyone who's getting copyright interest, that you really need less and less help from a publisher. As you get into the larger publishing companies, you have even less and less help normally based upon the size of the company that it is, with the amount of physical people who work there, with the amount of copyrights that they have to service, and the amount of writers they have to service. So again, it goes back to the relationship. A lot of publishers say often that they will do this and that for your career. And if you're competing to sign a songwriter, often publishers will make claims that I will get you in the room with this person, I will get you in the room with that person. I personally tend not to do that. My history is working within independent publishing is based on saying, I will absolutely help you in any way I can. I will absolutely try to introduce you to people that you don't know, but I will absolutely not be able to call Beyonce and tell her to get you in the room with her for this movie that she's writing for, that she's going to write a song for, and she has to have you in it. That is very rare to do. It's very rare that a publisher has that relationship. There are 4 or 5 major publishers in the world who have that pull, or heads of record labels or heads of publishing companies that might be able to do that. But for the most part, you have to have the understanding of what your job is as a publisher to what your job is as the songwriter. And I think that's an important relationship. And there were many times in my career where I've had to work with the songwriters on redefining what our relationship is about. They would come to me and say, I'm not getting placements, or I'm not getting this. And I'd say, okay, well, I'd love you to get those things, because I, as a publisher, cannot make money unless you make money. Unless you're generating the song royalty, I can't collect it, license it, protect it, and give it to you. I can't do those things. So my job is to not write the song. My job is to work as the publisher. Your job is to write the song. If somehow I was able to write and be a publisher, as Chris is, I'd be really as cool as Chris. But I'm not.
Well, we all wish we were as cool as Chris.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
I really do say that often, though. I'm like, listen, somebody will come to me and say, hey, how come I can't? I say, listen, the songwriting is your thing. It ain't mine. If I knew how to write and be a publisher, I'd definitely be above this conversation.
Well, you are great at what you do, Scott.
Oh, thank you.
But maybe you can take this next question. I'll try to move things along. I have a couple more I'd like to get through.
Yeah.
But you can start and the others can chime in. But what are your thoughts on why there are so many middlemen in the music business as opposed to film? And do you know what some of the jobs they do are and what functions they serve?
When you're asking about a middleman, are you talking about the ancillary people that's part of your career, whether it's business managers, press people? Are you talking about things like that?
Yeah, just in reference to our conversation the other day about how there seem to be a lot more middlemen in music than in film.
I just think that, this kind of goes back to the conversation that we've all had, maybe even in a pre-call or in conversations. You have to understand the business that you're in, and not everyone understands completely this business that you're in. So there is a need for people to help you along the way, or be a part of your path, or be a part of your process. If you can't do it all, as talented as we all are, there are many times where you don't, as a songwriter, understand the steps that go forward. So people in the process can be helpful to you. And this is a very, let's be honest, the music business is not a very well understood business to be involved in. It does have a lot of gray area. It does need a lot of expertise. And as far as middlemen go, listen, people are always creating jobs so they could take a piece of your pie, right? I mean, that's almost in almost every business.
Okay, so the next couple questions I have are a little bit about the Music Modernization Act. So this is addressed to everyone. So, and although some of this falls under mechanicals and not really subject of publishing, perhaps, let's talk about the MMA. known as the Music Modernization Act, and the lesser-known AMP Act, which is the Allocation for Music Producers Act of March 22nd, 2018. What are they? How do they affect publishers or songwriters, producers, or engineers? So if someone wants to touch on that.
Chris, maybe?
I was going to say, I'm going to let Scott do that because he's got the overview as a publisher. But I'm happy to comment after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Music Modernization Act is very, very important for songwriters and publishers moving into this digital age that we're in. And I don't want to get too deep into why things are restricted for the earnings of songwriters. That might be a separate panel. But there are government oversight. There is government oversight, I should say, where songwriters are not in charge of what they're potentially earning or able to negotiate their songs in a free market basis. We mentioned before, sync is the only area that they can do this. So we mentioned DSPs, digital service providers. They are right now creating a marketplace of millions of users, generating advertising dollars, generating subscription fees, generating all kinds of other income, and using songs as the vehicle to which people subscribe to their business. So with that, we as songwriters and publishers believe that we should be able to make a fair value on using those songs to run your business. The Music Modernization Act, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't involved in too much of the politicking about it, but the MMA, it was created to bring up the value of what songwriters are going to be paid over time from these digital service providers. And I know we might get into this in a little bit, but currently there's a different climate going on than, yes, we are going to pay people more, as the Googles and the Amazons and the larger companies are not actually willing to embrace the Music Modernization Act. They are actually going to what's called a rate court or a copyright review board court to actually try to not only have to pay not more than what the government has set as the law and the increase, and not even keep it the same, but they're actually countersuing to pay less.
Yeah, but not all streaming services are doing that.
Apple is not taking part of that. Correct.
Spotify, Google, all that.
It's Spotify, Google, Amazon. Yes, that is correct. Apple is not taking part in the lawsuit. They are on board to pay more, and in some sense that makes sense. I mean, Apple did, in a lot of people's eyes, help rescue the music business in some ways by creating iTunes, where all the competing record labels had their own service stores. So if you went to the Warner store to buy a Warner product, you couldn't get a Columbia product or a CBS product or a Sony product. And all of these competing stores eventually failed, and iTunes figured, Jobs and Apple figured out a way to allow these things to coexist and really move what we are into the digital age. So you're absolutely right, Chris. I shouldn't have said all of them, but Apple is I'll call it the songwriter's friend, where there are some other companies that absolutely are not.
My daughter, I buy Apple Music for the music subscription for our family. My daughter wants me to get Spotify. I said, hey, you know what? When you have your own money to spend, you spend it how you want. I'm not putting a dime in those people's pockets. I will not, under any circumstances, subscribe to that service because it's like a songwriter eating his own foot. I'm just not going to.
So to take it to a different point, or to enhance that point a little bit, there is such a disdain in the songwriter community, or should be if they're not privy to it. There's such a disdain for having somebody make more money off of your music than even you you can't even control the fact that you want to try to get paid more. There's laws that prevent you from getting paid more.
Right. Yes.
So imagine, and we could talk about this again. This is another nerdy publishing thing, but can you imagine if you were a film studio and you made a movie and somehow the government told you what you could charge for somebody to go watch your film? That doesn't exist. There wouldn't be movie studios. The creation of art in that case would cease to exist. So there would be no people who wanted to create film to be told what to be charged for it. Just as in the art world, if you create a piece of pottery or a sculpture or a painting, the government doesn't come in and say what you could sell it for. So with these limitations, it is an angst amongst the songwriting and publishing community where we can't get paid a free market value of what we're doing, especially when these companies are so large and making so much money.
And this
That's
is
great.
why the Music Modernization Act was put
Created.
together, which was a long legislation coming. And it finally happened, and it passed in October 2018. There were a couple of other elements that came along. It was really probably the most important legislation in the copyright business for, a couple of generations.
For
Really.
50 years, probably, yeah.
We had not updated the copyright laws, and this did allow for what it really, just to put it in simpler terms, allows for songwriters and publishers the PA copyright, not the sound recording, not the artist and the record labels, because they're already getting their royalties from the digital service providers. This allows for the songwriters and the music publishers to finally receive a just due rate from the digital service providers. Well, how do you do that? You do that with a completely separate licensing agent, similar to Sound Exchange. We sometimes call it Song Exchange because it's for the songwriter share. A new licensing agent has been developed. Again, a government regulated agency. It came out of the Music Modernization Act. They said you will have to set up your own collection agent and the government will help you. The digital service providers will pay for it because most of them say, hey, we want to pay, we just don't know how to do it.
We don't know who to pay, right?
We want you to help us, we'll pay for the collection agent. So the MLC was born, the Mechanical Licensing Collective, for digital mechanicals, not regular mechanicals, for digital mechanicals, which is, all your performances on Spotify and Pandora and so on. That collective is up and running. They're going to get ready to start licensing on January 1st, 2021. They are on a tour right now, speaking to songwriter groups all over the country, trying to gear everybody up, songwriters and publishers, gear them up for this new collection agency and getting your songs registered. You could go to the MLC.com and get information. If you are a self-administered songwriter, songwriter publisher, you can get information there on how to upload your information. If you are a publisher with ASCAP, BMI, or SESAC or GMR, you would have received a letter from the MLC recently asking you if you minded, if you would allow the Harry Fox agency to work as a liaison, and will you opt in to allow us to get the information from Harry Fox agency to input our database and start our database? It's their first data dump. If you do receive that letter, like if you have songs that have been recorded, really, is people who are going to get those letters. If you have songs, opt in, allow that to happen. Otherwise, you're going to have to do it yourself. But this is the beginning of what I remember what happened when Sound Exchange started. There was no money and we were all kind of going, what's this going to be? And now it's a multi-billion-dollar business. The same thing could happen with this. Let's pray to God. for the songwriters. So you're going to have to get your songs registered
and get your data right.
Get your data right. This is a huge problem. And now it's all about data. You can't
That's
just
right.
be a creator and a great songwriter. You got to have your act together, and you got to know how to do your administration. And if you don't have a music publisher, you got to become like Chris Horvath and become a nerd and learn it yourself. There's so many tutorials online. There's so many great organizations like SONA, SONA, Songwriters of North America.org. Chris is very involved with them. There's the NSAI, Nashville Songwriters Association International, excellent organization. There's my little organization in New York, NYC3, New York City Creative Community. You can go to our Facebook page and watch our live stream from last week's excellent discussion with NSAI and with SONA on the same subjects. It's a free stream. It's also on my Facebook page. There's so much information out there to learn about. I know it's a lot, but just so you know, it's a new day is coming and you have great opportunities. I wanted to speak real quickly about the AMP Act, which is
Great. Thank you, Linda.
Yeah, which is important for you guys to know about the AMP. What the hell does AMP stand for again? AMP, I forget what it stands for.
Allocation for Music Producers Act.
Thank you. Allocation for music producers. Again, another long time coming. Music producers never got a royalty for their performances that get paid until this new AMP Act finally got signed into law. It was part of the bundle of things that happened with the Music Modernization Act, and it is a law now. So songwriters are now, or music producers, mixers and engineers are now able to apply to Sound Exchange. Okay, we're going back to the record label and the artist royalty pie. They're able to apply to Sound Exchange, become members themselves if you have credit on a song. If you have credit, like as a producer, you get points, as an engineer, as a mixer. If you were paid a flat fee and you don't have any creative participation, this is not for you. This is for the producers and engineers who did get a little point on the record, who can apply to get a royalty, a little royalty, and still a little royalty.
Yes, and sign up, and there's a letter of direction package you have to fill out. There's instructions. It's very easy to do. You can also call Sound Exchange. It's very easy to get them on the phone if you have any questions. All this info, we've posted it up, but it's super, super important. That song has to be registered, though, by the artist. You will not receive anything unless they've registered it. That is one thing I have learned also recently. But I think this is going to be really groundbreaking as time goes along. And we have to wrap up. We have to let you guys go soon. It's been such a great panel. But maybe Chris, you were involved a little bit on the legislation. Do you want to? You helped out a lot, and you were volunteering. Do you want to offer anything about this? This is
sure. I'll do it very quickly because like Scott, who I've just met today. I'm such a dweeb about this stuff, and I could go so far inside baseball that everyone would glaze over. But I will just tell you this, the MMA, to me, to right the ship, so to speak, of issues of compensating copyright holders, you needed 10 steps in the right direction. I think the MMA is about 5 of them, maybe 6. Like, this was good. You're never gonna fix anything overnight, but this was overwhelmingly good. And you read a lot in the trade press. Here was my experience. We worked with a lot of congressmen and senators through SONA. I'm a founding member of SONA. And we worked with Jerry Nadler out of New York, who is awesome. We worked with Doug Collins out of Georgia, who is awesome. And these people, Doug more so than Jerry, Doug's a music fan. But Jerry's like excuse my French, but just a no bullshit guy that's like, he's like, this is not right. We're going to see what we can do. And he just doesn't take it from anybody. And so I'll just tell you this, the MMA went through Congress unopposed, 400 and whatever to nothing. Show me another bill that went through like that so easily. Everybody's always on this thing, and then it went through the Senate. Why? because when you really peel back the layers and look at the situation that what Scott alluded to with these ASCAP BMI consent decrees that have put handcuffs on us songwriters and music creators as to how much we can charge. They were signed in 1940s. It's unreasonable. It's unfair. Back then, it was fair. It was great. We needed them. Times have changed. And so now, you know, the legislative process was long. It was arduous. And I said to Scott this morning in a pre-call, I said, if any of us had known what that was going to be, we never would have signed up for it.
Right.
It was pushing a boulder uphill.
But thank you that you did.
You know, and it was like, you know, and at first you, wow, this is really great. This is going well. And then there was a whole thing that happened near the end with this giant conglomerate, Blackstone, that where suddenly everybody was not going to vote in our favor, and then they were going to vote in our favor and all that. Legislatively, this was very, very good. And it's in law, there's the concept of precedent. All right. When you set a precedent, then future decisions reference that precedent. And the fact that this went pretty well is laid the groundwork for future change.
Agreed.
Not that it's going to be easy,
And not
that
overnight.
it's going to be overnight. And what I used to say when we were sitting around in SONA meetings, all of us enjoying in my case, my fourth glass of wine, I would say, you know, the thing is that what we're doing here is everything we're doing is for the people that are starting now. Because by the time that this all comes into effect, we're going to be long retired.
We'll be out of here.
So we're doing this for the 20-year-old person right now. But we love what we do, and we love the craft and the art of music and songwriting, and it's a value, and it's unreasonable to not compensate people for it. You know,
We
so
really appreciate all your efforts, Chris.
Well, I was a small part of it.
Still, you know, it's
But legislatively, my takeaway was that by virtue of the fact that it went through it kind of went through Congress unopposed, and it made it, and you know, do with it what you will, but this administration is very, very friendly to copyright owners. So whatever else you want to say about it, we knew that if it made it to the desk, that the guy was going to sign it. So it, you know, it's, I choose to focus on the fact that, you know, good things are ahead. There will always be a demand and a need. I will say a need, frankly, for music. And, you know, if you are choosing this as your career, as your path in life, then you've made a good choice. But, you know, it's not like being a dentist. It's not, there's going to be ups and downs. And so legislatively, I've been very encouraged by what just happened.
Yeah, so I have to thank you all so much, and I've kept you way over time, but this is important actually for music creators and young engineers and producers and older engineers and producers to educate themselves more about what we talked about, and, you know, learn more about the AMP Act and sign up if you are due royalties, etc. It's very important to do that. So before I let you guys go, let me see if there's any questions. Let's see. Anyone?
How many people were here?
About 80 or so.
Oh, great.
20
Cool.
in this room.
Yeah.
20 in this room, 20 in the other.
Let's see.
Great
See
to
anything
have you
in
guys.
particular? Rowie, do you have any questions? I don't know if I see any.
You have movie book.
Why don't you ask it, because I don't see it.
It's right there in the comments.
Yeah, I don't see it.
We covered everything.
I know.
Yeah, there's
That's it.
nothing else to discuss.
There's
We
nothing
covered
else
it
to
all.
We're nothing if not verbose.
No. Well, I think the important thing to remember, though, is just that there are a lot of different royalty streams out there now. It's just that you have to sort of take control of your business and make sure you find out ways to, find out ways that you can manage your own administration. Just, set aside a couple of days a month to just go through your catalog and make sure you've got everything all registered and set up, because that's the only way the monies are going to come in, is if you file for them.
If you're not going to do that, then at least work with a publisher who will work with you and
Absolutely.
connect the dots where they need to be, and you have that relationship, and go after everything that's yours to collect it. Because as a publisher, like I said before, I can't make a nickel, a dime, a quarter of a penny, or a micro penny by just collecting. Somebody has to write it, and we have to have a relationship to work together. So the relationship between the songwriter and the publisher is a very important thing for me.
Actually, one question just in before we go in a different direction. Does anyone know if book publishers and authors operate in a similar model as a music business or in a different model?
So, I mean, in general, a lot of people, when you explain something that you're a music publisher, a lot of people say is the same thing as book publishing. And in a sense, book publishers work in a general way as not only the editor, but the distributor of the product. And in music, the most publishers are not the distributor. They're really neither in the editor or in the editing process either. They're really in the collection process. So though they have similar names, they really are not, in my opinion, very relatable. As a general thing, you could say if someone's a book publisher, I publish things for music instead of books. But really, they're two separate processes.
And what about the film or movie business? Last question.
In terms of publishing?
Yeah, does it operate in a similar manner as the music industry, say in terms of royalties or?
Well, interestingly enough, and I think Linda and Chris can both chime in on this because they've had they've been around for quite a while with this. There is not a single film company that I'm aware of that doesn't also have their own music publishing company. Am I correct? But they all usually, they make movies, and if they hire people to make songs for their films, they're going to want to be the publisher of those songs in those films. Disney being one of them. There were very, very large companies that were created out of MCA, which was, the Movie Corporation of America, MCA, so, and I think that I still think in today's world, they're part of major organizations, but when the film studios were vastly different, and a lot of them independent, not just 5 major companies like there are today or so, they all had music publishing companies with them because they all put songs in their movies, and why wouldn't they want to be the owners and the collector of those royalties either? So.
All right. Well, thank you all so very much. This was amazing. Linda, Chris, Scott, it's amazing information. Appreciate you being here today so much. So,
our pleasure.
Thank
yeah.
you.
So thanks to our guests and AES headquarters for sharing our AES New York section event online. As always, we appreciate Eventide for supporting us. We want to invite everyone to join us next Tuesday at 3 p.m. for another great event, an interview with Dave Amlin and Tony Druten of Sound on Sound Studios in New Jersey. They are fully operational and busy with bookings while following strict health and safety protocols, making tremendous efforts in protecting their clients and the staff, and will also be given an online tour of the facility at that time and chat a little bit about large ensemble recording they have done in the past, including award-nominated Broadway soundtrack albums. So that's my spiel for next week. So thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming, and have a great day.
Thanks,
so
everyone.
much.
Guys,
Bye.
thank you, Angela.
Bye.